Hello and welcome to Trekkie and Beyond, a Star Trek podcast. I'm Moneca.
And I'm Andrea, and welcome to season 4 of Lower Decks season reactions. Because we have gone through it, we have done it, we have seen it all, and we are here to talk about it. But as always, whenever we have a season review reaction episode, we like to have a guest so you can get a third party interpretation of this season, and not just me and Monica's, even though we don't always agree, but we have great points. So today we have a host who has been here before. So welcome back, Richard.
Oh, thank you. What a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you guys having me back on for this season 4 reaction of Lower Decks. I enjoyed my time last time so much that I was looking forward to your guys' call. So thank you. And the mission continues.
It does. The mission does continue. So this episode, as always, is a little bit differently structured than our other episode recaps. So this one, we are going to be talking about our reaction as a whole for the season, and then each one of us has 3 different pinpoints that we want to talk about that we noticed, liked, didn't like from this episode. It could be from favorite reaction, things we want the writers to know, or just the best episode. So let's go ahead and get into it. As our guest, Richard, can you please tell us what your season reaction of 4 was?
My overall reaction to season 4 of Lower Decks, I liked it. I liked the fact that the characters got promoted and they had to find new ways to deal with that, and then the challenging life situations that came out and how they had increased mission responsibilities. So overall, I liked it, and I liked seeing them move up to lower junior grade.
Like Richard, I liked it a lot. Lower decks, lower decks, lower decks. I'm all for it. It walks on like the borderline of being unbelievable. And it can do that because it's also in an animation state. So it's able to project some characters that if it was in live action, I would not believe it. I would not believe Peanut Hamper in live action. I would not believe Moopsie in live action. and all the badgies. Just all the badgies. So there's a way in which it could tell these stories and just stretch our imagination, and show us these different scenes. I think in a lower budget, possibly a lower risk format for Paramount. I really appreciate that creativity and the comedy in this. What about you, Andrea?
Okay, so I want to preface by saying I did like this season. I did. But to me, it was sort of a letdown compared to seasons 1 through 3. I feel like the bar was set so high in those seasons that this season did not, it's not as memorable for me as the other 3 seasons were. And while I still love the episodic format, like I loved it. So like I love when every episode is a whole different thing. We're going into a whole different world in every episode. I think for me, it may have been better if they had started the season arc maybe like halfway through the season, like they have done in the past. And because from episode 1, that first ship went missing and it was like a mystery. Star Trek has a way of like trying to build this huge mystery, and then the end result is not always as big or worth the payoff for some people, for me in particular. So again, I still love Lower Decks. It was still good, but it didn't hold up for me to the other season. So this is where we all picked 3 different topics of what we want to talk about from season 4, things that stood out to us the most.
I would say the biggest thing I remember was Rutherford had a baby. I'm like, what? I'm just saying that it was. So I like the fact they always had a surprise for you, something you didn't see that came out. That was one of them.
It was a big shock. I remember, I will not actually be able to get that scene out of my head. Really good parent. He has natural instincts at that. And he also helped mentor Dr. Tana along to become a better parent as well. Yeah, so for me, though, my biggest shock, and it's just something that just stayed in my head because I was frozen the moment this happened in the show, was when Boimer died. It only was for a few moments, but I was like, what? He's a main character. Wait. So I had to pause the show because I was like, how do you do this? I'm vested in him. Like, I'm connected to him. And it was such a big episode for him because we saw him in this leadership role and he was taking full responsibility. He finally learned how to delegate as a leader, and then he like died. It was an explosion, and all of a sudden we saw his limp body fall to the ground. I was like, what in the world? So that was shocking to me. And then fast forward to the end of the episode, he was resurrected, and then we saw him again, and that was another shock because I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. I know Shaq's return, but I didn't know that was also an option when like he was it was a huge explosion. So I don't understand how that happened. And Dr. Tana wasn't sure either because I rewatched the episode and she was like, "Oh, I'm surprised that worked." So, I'm glad, but yeah, that was a hard episode for me, and it also showed the development of his character into this leadership role, which in the end he became acting captain for a while. So 3, the cradle.
I think for me, out of that episode, the most shocking thing was that the computer was actually a good thing, a good person, like a good supercomputer. Like we never see a nice supercomputer or a supercomputer that's like, you know, not trying to kill humans, who like respects humans and wants to like love and cherish them, who's not annoying because go back to Discovery. So sorry, but that Nebula computer thingy was just, I couldn't take it anymore. So it was, for me, I like that the computer was, oh, I just want to serve my people correctly. Like, help me. Also on a high note, my favorite episode, which is also someone else's favorite episode, not gonna say who, is episode 2. I have no bones, yet I must flee. And the reason this is my favorite episode is not because of Moopsie, because Moopsie's crazy and scary, and no, cute things will kill you. No. The reason this is my favorite episode, and I rewatched the entire season last night and this morning before we recorded. And this season, it was one of the first little nudges for Mariner to get on this was like the final come to Jesus season for Mariner. And rewatching it made me realize she actually started trusting Ransom in this episode and was trusting that the higher ups, she was no longer fighting the higher ups after this episode, it seems. She was still doing crazy things, but it wasn't in a way to disrespect anyone anymore. It was more of I just do crazy things. I just don't want to get my friends in danger. It was more, I'm going to save everyone versus I'm going to be outright disrespectful to the higher ups. That come to Jesus moment she had with Ransom was very telling that this season she was going to change a bit more. I didn't catch it on the first watch because I didn't know how the rest of the season was going to end up. But when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, I don't think I remember her actually being rude to higher ups after this. She was still like her out there boisterous, outgoing self, but she wasn't directly disrespectful like she was in the past couple of seasons. So, because we know in this episode, she showed up in workout gear. She was not trying to dress. She was not trying to be in uniform. She was just being outright disrespectful to Ransom. And he was just like, I'm not going to let you affect me anymore. And she's like, because you're a good person. So that's why you're going to get this. I'm not going to let you sabotage yourself. And then I think this was the beginning of her true, hopefully, God, please, final come to Jesus moment. So that is why episode 2 is my favorite. But before we get into the discussion of episode 2, I do know that I am going to go a little out of order, but I'm going to call on Monica because I think this might be someone else's favorite episode.
It is my favorite episode of season 4 because of what you just said, and because of two other main points. First of all, I love Moopsie. Moopsie. And you cannot judge a book by its cover. Sometimes the most innocent creatures are the ones, and the quiet ones are the ones you should be most scared of. And that was the case. And it was a little mystery that Mariner Ransom had to solve along the way, because it was like a mystery within a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the humans from Earth that was the troublesome ones of the whole time that planned this whole thing. But I want to say that within this, we were also able to see the menagerie in a much better way. Mm-hmm. And that is from the original series, a pilot episode, which originally featured Pike. And it was not my favorite episode of the original series. And it did not age well. And so in Lower Decks, because it's animation, they're able to do a lot more things and show these types of these cages, and basically like a zoo or a Noah's Ark of different species across the galaxy, and you're able to believe it much more than in the original series. So hats off to improving an episode in the original series in a subtle way, in a better way, and they upgraded it. And so I really like that aspect. But circling back to Moopsie, ended up killing the captor, like the person that is captive.
Nars. Because Nars talk about Nars in third person.
Yes, that was
Nars' bones are calcified.
Because later on in the season, there was another like archaeologist that was doing something similar, but kept making excuses for the creatures and wouldn't believe them and stuff like that. But Moopsie like made sure it was able to escape and make sure that at least this part doesn't happen again. So, yes.
Interesting fact that you just said. So the episode you're talking about, I think, is episode 9. And it's so but Nars and the doctor from episode 9 in the very beginning both had a love of the creatures, but also a healthy understanding of what they were. And so when Moopsie got out, Nars freaked out and ran. He was like, "No, it eats your bones." No. And then that other episode was like, "Oh, they are such majestic creatures." No, they're not. They will kill you if they're not behind the fence. So that is funny that they both had like, "Oh, they're super cute and cuddly and adorable. Oh my God, they will kill you. They're out. Everyone run for your lives."
Yes. And that was a memorable moment too, in that episode, and that reminded me a lot of Jurassic Park kind of storyline. But back to episode 2 in I Have No Bones Yet I Must Flee, we also saw the blossom of Boimler and Rutherford's bromance, and their friendships really develop, and Rutherford ended up mentoring Boimler in lots of different ways so that Boimler could also join the security team for a little bit. So we started to see that character development further, and I appreciate all of those types of aspects.
My favorite thing was how Brad and Rutherford had to solve things, their disagreement by being Mark Twain in the holodeck. And I was like, "You, sir? No, you too, sir. Yeah, thank you." And then and then Rutherford used it again later on with someone else. And so on the holodeck, it's Mark Twain. So 2 Mark Twains.
Yeah, that Mark Twain part occurred in episode 4, this Something Borrowed, Something Green. And I like that episode except for the Mark Twain part, and then also the negotiation with that other species. I know that Mark Twain holodeck scene also occurred in other Star Trek series. It just doesn't connect for me.
Yeah. I have to say, I did like episode 4. So I agree, it was a good episode. I love seeing Tendi's homeworld. I loved that Tindy was able to sort of go from personality 1, personality 2, and sort of merge them in this episode. So she became, you know what, that's what the season's about. All of them becoming whole as they like move up. All of them becoming more accepting of themselves as they move up. But we see that Tindy always sort of considered herself. She didn't really consider her Star Trek self, her Starfleet self, her real self, and then she had to like be on a ride and had to be someone different. So this was a great blending episode of bringing the old and new together. And I did like, and I also think Taylin started feeling more like a member of Starfleet in this episode versus just this is a way station until I can get home. So
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That with Talin, then Tindy finding out that they knew, like Talin said, well, we already knew you were a princess, assassin, pirate, but we didn't judge you on that. And that's when it was like it had a heart for like, oh, all the stuff she's thinking that people are assuming, they still giving her a chance to be the best she can be.
Yeah. One quick thing about that episode is funny when Mariner just kept getting stabbed in the shoulder by a knife.
Like the same spot. And my biggest shock is episode 7, A Few Badgies More. And the reason this is my biggest shock is because I was like genuinely like, what the F this entire episode. When I went back and I did my rewatch, I really did think Badgie was the one that was behind everything. The way they sort of even started episode 7, it made us think Badgie was the one that was behind everything. And the fact that they threw in all the other supercomputers that were trying to rule over humanity, it was sort of just like, oh yeah, you think it's us, but it's not. So it was the biggest shock because you thought, one, the ships were being destroyed, and they weren't. You find that out at the end of this episode that none of the ships were destroyed. You find out that it's like basically you don't think any actual computer is behind it. And then Badgie just sort of becomes a god. And it's like, what the heck is this episode? So I think this episode threw the most little random curveballs. Like Peanut Hamper is supposed to get a redemption story. No. You get Agamemnon. He's like simping for her to be her best friend. Like what? Like there's just so much what the F in this episode that it is my biggest shock because I just if you would have asked me to predict how this episode was going to go after seeing the first 5 minutes, I would have been completely wrong because it just kept doing left turn after right turn and left turn and right turn. There was no straight line. To me, there was no rhyme or reason for this episode. So that is why it's my biggest shock because I'm still just like, how does this episode make sense?
That episode was my second favorite episode of the season. And it's because of the fact that the showrunners made AI seem like really big characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's just like a box had lots of personality. Like this floating device Peanut Hamper had so much personality, and Badgie like tripled. And then we've just found out that Badgie just needed a hug. He needed support from his father the whole time. And that's why I nicknamed this episode Daddy Issues. Because between Peanut Hamper and Good G, Badgie, Logic G, they all just needed their paternal role figures back in their lives for support. And Rutherford was there the whole time. And Tindy was also there to help support some AI as well. So I like this episode a lot. It was not connected as much to the season arc, so I felt like it could have been like a one-off, unless we bump into Badgie later on in the future as like the AI god that it has now become. If if that develops further, then I can see more of a then that episode has made a bigger impact.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad episode. It was just the most shocking for me because it was just.
In that episode, we also
Rutherford still did not learn anything because he kept Goodgie, and it was just like, did you Also, learn nothing, Rutherford. Like, why? Why?
Yeah, that deflated my bubble at the very end. I think that there is a big missed opportunity. And just
Okay.
going to lay this out there. This is not my traditional answer to one of our season reactions. In Strange New Worlds, there was a crossover episode with Lower Decks. And that was Strange New World Season 2, Episode 7, Those Old Scientists, in which Boimler went 120 years into the past and was able to interact with Pike and the rest of the Enterprise crew. Then later on, Mariner joins along for the ride, right? And so I was led to believe there was going to be a little bit more inside of Lower Decks to talk about the crossover. And so I'm disappointed that there wasn't, and maybe this, like, my source was wrong, but there was definitely a big opportunity there because there's lots of unanswered questions. And I know that in the first episode of the season 4, Mariner made a quick comment about their time travel, but that was it. There was no also other reflections back in the past. And so I just have so many unanswered questions. Like, Boimler dropped a lot of hints during the his time on the Enterprise, and we know that he does not keep secrets. So I can imagine a scene, and this is me talking right now to the showrunners of Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks, specifically Jonathan Frakes and Mike McCann. Like, here, I'm talking to you, folks. And so
he's a writer now. He's a writer now.
There could have been a scene in which Mariner and Boimler, even if it's in a short trek, are talking over drinks and her favorite Orion cocktail, right? That end up getting the Strange New Worlds crew completely drunk and out of their, I don't know, physical form. So there could have been an episode in which they're reminiscing and they're talking about their experience in this time travel because they can't talk to anybody else. But that could have been like a really cool conversation and venting. And then also, like, what happened to Rutherford and Tendi as they're waiting there for days
on the other side.
They had to been worried sick. I'm sure it called back to Freeman, and Freeman as Mariner's mom would have been worried as well, so confused about that. I know also this would be hard for Boimler because he met his poster girl number 1. They both met Uhura, that they're both completely Star Trek stuck with. There was like diplomacy and stuff like that. And Boimler learned a lot from Tendi about the Orions, and he was able to present that to Pike. So he helped with the mission. I would think that he would want to, like, at least drop something, even if Tendi didn't make the connection about how he helped save the day. But back to the fundamentals of that episode crossover. At the end of the crossover episode, the Orions, who we learn are not all pirates, they're also scientists, took the time travel device and moved it somewhere so that no one else could use it, right? So then how did then they protect it and move it back 120 years later? So that could be part of the scene that's presented there. There's something else that has to happen, or even if it stays in the same place, they have to put some sort of force field around it so that other people don't use it, because people are going to use it for the wrong intentions. They're going to be evildoers out there who's going to want to time travel to get resources or something. So, I think I could create a short Trek episode just for this one, but I really wanted this to learn more and to see more aspects, especially since that was my favorite episode of Strange New Worlds.
So I definitely have to agree that that was also a letdown in season 4 for me, that there was no real mention of the crossover. Because like even in the promotion about season 4, they have that little line that Mariner says, I was like, oh, that mission in the past we're not supposed to talk about. It hinted and it led us to believe that we would get more of that crossover in season 4. And yeah, there was so much that they could have done regarding it. There could have been, oh, there was another accident, they were sent to the future. It's like, okay, well, we know some people here, let's find them, that way they can get us back. Like, there was so much that could have been done, and they didn't. And it yeah, no, yeah, you're right, it was a like, unless we're getting it in season 5, they should have touched on it in this episode, because in this season, because I was looking forward to it.
The only thing I remember them even talking about going in the past was about Captain Janeway and two Vics when the two people merged as one as a incident coming through the transporter.
That was funny.
I mean, and then how they was figuring out how, and then because the person didn't want to die, they kept creating more putting people together throughout the whole thing. But yeah, they did miss the opportunity to go back. But I kept calling this season the tribute to D Space Nine, because that's what the Ferengi Heart Pace was all about, really. And then because that was the episode, I think it was 6, but it didn't have anything really. It was more like comic relief because all the things that were going on in that, but it wasn't. You couldn't, because the Ferengi were joining Starfleet officially, and that was with the admiral and the captain signing, and they were trying to take advantage of them. But Freeman got the best of them, and that at the end, which was great, and they got their respect because they and it was just great to see Vollmer stuck on TV, watching TV at home, like most people binging a show or something. And I think they were just making fun of like life in the 20th century of, watching shows and infomercials, put product placement and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was just like a comic relief thing. But I saw also with Tindy and Rutherford, they like always joking around about having a relationship, and then they got put in a situation they're supposed to have a relationship, and they found it was too much for them. And so I just thought it was just so much stuff in it and little corny things, because I did like Ferengi TV, cop landlord. I like that. and when the guy died, and he was like, "Oh, so you support late rent payments?" Transfer all your Latinum over to me. I mean, so it was just like a comic relief, but it was just, but they go deep into different things. But I just thought that throughout a couple episodes where like caves, they always, in Star Trek, when you watch any Star Trek series, somebody's always stranded, left in a hole somewhere. And and caves, that's what's showing that all those characters have been in a hole somewhere or stuck in the elevator. So I just thought that was like a straight tribute to the whole theme, like somebody somewhere gonna be stranded and they're on their own in a cave. And so I like that, and that's why I like the Ferengi Heart Place.
Just to piggyback on that Ferengi episode, I would be remiss if I didn't say that one of the characters that made a big improvement for me was really Captain Freeman. And she negotiated in that Ferengi episode. She showed so much more leadership than I had ever seen her before.
Competent leadership.
Yes. And a role model to them. There's been little scenes along the way, but she really carried that admiral, the admiral the whole way. And if it wasn't for her, the Federation would have been in a much weaker situation with that contract. So even though she didn't make one of my major points, I do want to mention that her character has evolved. I really like the writing associated with her character now.
You're right. You're both right. Y'all both right. So moving into my final memorable moment thing. Mine is the worst episode. And I'm going to preface this by saying the reason I'm considering this the worst episode is because of the placement that they put it in the series. I think that if this episode was placed in the beginning of the season, it would not be my worst episode. But because of where it was placed, it was just like, what are we doing? And that is episode 8, Caves. I think Caves was pointless because it came right after the Badgie episode and right before the first half of the season arc episode. It was an episode that added nothing to the season. And if you take it out, the whole season would basically be the same. And because because by this point we were so engrossed in the season arc story of season 4, throwing in Caves just like we learned nothing. What like, yes, we get to go back and see like, oh, different little fun things that they had times together, or times that each one of them grew sort of separately as they've all been promoted, and like scenes from the season 4 that we didn't see. But what was the point? Because you showed this episode right after Badgie, and we learned that none of the ships were actually taken. None of the ships were actually blown up. They were taken. And then we are going into the season arc, part 1 arc, the next episode. This seems such like a filler episode because they didn't have something else to bridge episode 7 to episode 9, that they just threw this one in there. And that's why it's my worst episode, because it just does not add to the plot that they were creating. If this was like if this was episode like 4 or 5 and they pushed the other episodes down behind it, I think it wouldn't be my worst episode, I don't think. But because of where it was placed, it's the worst episode because it just broke up the drama. It did not add anything to it. To me, it just broke up the story.
Yeah, it felt like a one-off for me as well. It was also not risky. It was not really suspenseful. I knew that they were going to get out at some point in time. The tough thing about now rewatching that after watching the finale is that it was really a bonding teamwork episode. It included 4 major lower deckers. Talin was not in that. And now that we know that Tendy's leaving, it's like, oh, it's going to be awkward for Talin to try to fill that role, that spot. They now have a really core niche of 4. A little concerned about Tendy leaving the show. I'm hoping we'll see her in other ways. I'm hoping like it's not just a write-off of her character. And I hope they didn't try to like add Talin to like replace, to add another 4th person in that. But it's not the same. So I'm concerned. That's all. But like you, it was on my it wasn't in my top.
Yeah.
List of episodes for the season.
If this came before Badgie, it probably wouldn't be on my worst episode. It was like literally for me, the placement of this episode was like, why? We're literally getting into the meat of the season and you're gonna throw this in? Why? This could have been episode 5, episode 6, episode 7, and you could have pushed other things out. This could have been after the Betazoid, and I wouldn't have been annoyed by its placement of it. But it's literally, you got one of the biggest clues of the season, and then you were just thrown into this. Because we knew the information the Betazoid gave, we knew that it was a ship grabbing them. Like, we knew this. We understood it. Sorry, we knew a ship was destroying it. We knew what the ship looked like, just
Right.
Captain Freeman and them, they didn't know what the ship looked like,
because every episode kept opening up with a ship getting taken, different species with their ships arguing amongst each other or what's going on, and then all of a sudden some warning, and all of a sudden this little ship shows up and takes them or destroys them. That's how it looked like. They destroyed them, and so that was the mystery. So that right there should have been earlier. I do agree with that.
Yeah, so I hope you like our memorable memories and moments. Like so many M sounds, people. So as we move into our wrap up, Richard, would you like to go first on your final thoughts of the season as a whole?
It's right with what you're saying, because I feel that season 4 was like a mixed bag in the early episodes, and then it kind of picked up momentum midway, and it finished strong with the finale. thank goodness the finale brought it in. Um, I think next that the main characters we'll see them getting promoted to lieutenant, and they'll be more involved, I think, with some of the officers in the away missions. Where this time you saw them doing some of their first missions, but now you'll see them, where they're the ones being told what to do, and they got to really follow what their commands are. I think you'll see that as their evolution begins. Um, I think you'll see Marina have a mission with Maha the Klingon that she had to fight with in the finale. They got through to her to make her see that she needs to honor the person, and become a better officer. So I look for that character to be more into the next season. And I just, for me, that I think that it's just 4 set it up 5 to promote a fresh future. I think that the best thing about Lower Decks is that it's a tribute to Star Trek, and it has a sense of humor, and the way it balances both comedy and science fiction, masterfully. So it's really helps fill in the gaps and expand certain things, like Moneca mentioned earlier, that some believable and unbelievable stuff. So this is, overall, I just think it's going to be a great season 5.
Okay. Moneca, your season thoughts?
I agree with Richard. I am also amazed at how much story they're able to tell in 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, between the fast-paced conversation and the scene changes, and they cover sometimes 2, 3, 4 plots at a time in 30 minutes. And then when I'm typing up the notes, my notes are long because it's actually lots of different adventures just written succinctly and without as much. There's drama, but there's not as much lows in the story, in the artistry of the episode. And so I really like that. I like also, because basically they're not wasting my time. I get that. And I like the consistency in the style of the storytelling. Strange New Worlds last season had lots of different ways in which they were telling the stories, between like opera, and there's a lot of hijinks and a lot of different ways in which they were telling the story. There was one episode with the flashback with the caves, but otherwise it was consistent types of storytelling throughout. And I like that as well. It wasn't as much of a gumbo. I think that they could continue, just do your thing. Just add a little flashback for me for the crossover episode, and that would be icing on the cake. But, but I think the showrunners are doing a really good job of also connecting in other series without like destroying canon. So, and I know that's really hard to do. You can't please all the people all the time, but just a little icing for me would be great.
I would like season 5 to go back to more episodic episodes and not season arcs. I'm fine with maybe like the last 4 episodes being all about a great mystery, or the last 3 episodes being about a great mystery. But one of the things about Lower Deck that I really enjoyed is that it's a stress-free watch. It's a like not really like turn off your brain, but it's like you just watch it and you enjoy it for what it is, because it's like funny, it's hilarious, it's serious at sometimes, it's not. And throwing in a season-long mystery, we have seen Star Trek do it, but I think it works the best if it's only like a 3 episode arc versus a 10 episode arc. Or don't make the season arc so prevalent, like how they did with Rutherford in the past, where it's like, oh, you got a little hint of something, but then it was never talked about again. So it's like, oh, this was just like a random thing, but it came up in later seasons, but it wasn't harped on every single episode that there was a mystery there. If it's something like that, I would prefer it. I just really don't want to do another season. I don't prefer season arcs, because I want to be invested in the show. I don't want to be let down because I got so invested in the mystery and the mystery wasn't good for me. Not necessarily saying the show was, not to say the book show was bad, but like for me personally, I think the season finale that they provided us was good if it was only a 3-episode arc versus getting a hint from all the way from episode 1. So I hope in season 5 they go back to the other format, because season 1 through 3, except for Peanut Hamper, I'd never want to watch Peanut Hamper on my screen ever again. Please, just, she's done. She's done. Please, she's done.
She's rehabilitated. She's all good now.
I don't want to see her on my screen at all. But I'm excited to see everyone sort of grow up, because this was their growing up season. Seasons 1 through 3, they were children almost like, and now they're becoming more adults. They're becoming more into themselves. They're becoming more confident. Formula wasn't freaking out in the captain's chair. He had a captain's voice. So we are seeing them grow up a bit. And so I'm hoping that continues in season 5. But they still get to be their fun, loving, funny selves. And then I want to see Tindy outside of uniform. Like, I really want to see her be the mistress of the winter solstice or whatever it is. I want to see her full on that person and not in a Starfleet uniform. I'm very excited to see what we have in the future. And then, yes, I agree with you, Moneca. If I don't get a crossover episode in season 5, I'm going to flip my desk, people. For listening to our season recap. And as always, I'm Andrea.
I'm Moneca.
And live long and prosper.